Welcome. My name is Shawn, and today I'm going to be reading to you from a book called I Am the Word. It's a channeled text by Selig, and it's a guide to the consciousness of man's self in a transitioning time. And that's exactly what I believe that we're in right now, and why I feel that this is the perfect time to start this book again. I say again because you may have already listened to my first broadcast of part 1. Well, I've decided today that I was going to redo that due to the amount of distortion and, well, half of the audio went missing. So today we are going to recommence with part 1, and this time I'm going to be uploading full audios of the book reading, but I'm doing this offline and I will later upload that fully online. And while I still will be doing this in the same format, as I won't be editing these videos, the goal remains the same. I wish to essentially bring together people who would love to perhaps participate in a book club or a reading workshop group where we can truly dive in and explore a lot of what this book and the following books, because this particular book is the first book of a 12-book series of books. So I hope to do audios as well as workshops and book club meetings on all of them, because I truly do believe this has been one of the most fundamental, foundational aspects of my own healing journey. And essentially, for those who are called to it, I truly do wish to share the insights, cognitions that I have essentially redeemed from this book, but also to share your insights and cognition. So as always, I highly encourage you to comment, because commenting for me has been an amazing ability to self-reflect. And it also kind of, digs deep or hammers down on the information which I did learn. And so, welcome. As I said, my name is Shawn, and thank you for joining me. I believe I should be in frame. So I'm going to, I'm not going to read to the camera, but I'm going to read away from the camera. And so at the end of this, I'm going to read, simply to explain what I'm doing, I guess, is that I'm going to read a portion of the book starting from, it's called the initial discussion. This is the book we're reading. And then afterwards, after I read them, we're going to discuss a few things, or I'm just going to essentially talk about a few things that we've read in there and their importance to me, as well as perhaps the insights that I've derived from them. Now, all of this is going to be done live, so I'm not going to be, as I said, editing anything. And this isn't the end all of stuff. This is simply kind of like me sharing a little bit of the book and then, talking through it. And so without saying anything about what we're going to read, we'll start reading now. I want to talk about a few things. And we have chapters to write, and we have issues to be absorbed in the larger text, 12 to 15 chapters, each one about Christ and the mastery of the vibration in a being. Now, we don't talk about the personage of Christ as we do the personage of Victoria or Paul or Stanley or Fred. No, that's not the real issue here. The issue here is to discuss what it means to be aligned to a Christ vibration in a body that walks around and encounters other bodies in frequency. Everything vibrates in a frequency. This much you both understand, and your readers will understand as well. Frequency is frequency. It's the molecular breakdown of the issue, as it were. Now, Paul will back away whenever we talk about science because he is frightened of it. He is not a scholar, however. We know what we talk about, and when we say it's the basis, we simply mean that when you vibrate at a frequency, that is the frequency that you are aligned to. And when you align to a frequency, that is what you call to you. That is your experience of yourself, and you're experienced by others in this way as well. So it's no big deal that you are a frequency. The question then becomes, what frequencies are available to you, and what do they mean? What does it mean to be in Christ at a certain frequency and tone, as it were? Paul is saying tone as in sound, and we will say yes in an extended way. And that is what we mean. Because tone implies resonance, and when something resonates, something is aligned to it with itself, and will call to it other tones, frequencies, expressions of Christ that are vibrating at a similar level. Now, the Christ frequency, as we understand it now, is a high one, and it has been misappropriated, entitled by most people who have presumed it to be Christian basis in religion, and a religion, unfortunately, that has received alignment to the wrong-mindedness of men throughout time. And once you bypass the religion and you understand that the Christ is a consciousness, is a frequency, is an offering to man from the Creator to align to, then you will have a very different experience of understanding who you are. There can be no Christ in man without man's aligning to it. It is there as a silence until it is awakened, and when it is awakened, it has one duty, which is to seek itself in realization. No one is without the Christ. It has not bypassed anyone. And there is in form a way of access this frequency that will be understood as we continue to transcribe our stories and our teachings to you both. Now, we do this with intention, and the intention is that the recruitment to this service becomes larger than two people discussing an issue with guides, service, and attendance. This becomes a larger issue in service because this work that is meant to be understood by others, and in time that it takes for us to be transcribing these notes and teaching and lessons, we could be waking up a lot of people. So we are assuming right now that this will be a vehicle to serve the awakening of others. We will assume this, and we will work with you both to align to the possibility that resurrecting the self in alignment with the Christ frequency is work of this time. The work of the time. The work of the time. Now we want to tell you some things before we go further. This book will be 12 to 15 chapters long. It will have basis of understanding that is called something that will entitle each chapter. But that will not be the real chapter. The real chapter, in a funny way, will be a microcosm of a larger teaching. And once the small teaching is understood and inherited by the consciousness of the reader, then the work will take off in the cosmos, as it were, and the reader will begin to absorb the structures beyond what has been read. If you understand that this is process that we are intending, and it's only if many of the chapters are and it's as if many of the chapters are edged in light and will be read in the higher frequencies once the key has been placed in the lock by the reader. That is going to be the process here. So it's as if we were to tell you, my weekend in Alaska is the chapter of this book. In fact, you would gain an understanding of all that could be. You would gain an understanding of all that is cold by reading the chapter without knowing what you're truly doing. You would be resonating at a certain level that would allow the dictaphone to continue beyond what's served on the physical page. Now I'm going to pause right there because I feel this time I kind of want to talk about what I'm reading as I'm reading it rather than going all the way to the back. So one of the things that I got from this first part of the book, and it would be, of course, nicer if the pages weren't moving around or whatever, but is that when they talk about the reader will absorb structures beyond what has been read. And so what I've taken from that during these books is that simply by reading the book or even listening to the book and maybe even just parts of the book, like this isn't the actual full start of the book. There is I believe, what they call a forward to it. So we did miss the forward portion to it. And then there is a preference. And then we get to the initial discussion. Now, how I've, as I said, come to understand it is that by reading this book, there is energy work being done on you. It means that with everything in our world, all thoughts, all sounds, all voices, there are frequency. And these frequencies, we've given words, for example. And so when we hear these words and we hear these thoughts and they essentially get us to perhaps even think other things, there's an activation going on. And for me, that's kind of what is being initially said on page 4 of the book, is that simply by reading the book, there are things that are going to go on and around in the back. The other thing that I should point out is that this book talks about Christ consciousness. And it'll go further and deeper into the book, but how I've come to understand it is that, religion and all those organizations around the world, they took what was said from the person referred to as Jesus and turned that into an entire religion, and then of course separated that into many different parts. But what I've come to understand is that Christ is a frequency, and this frequency has been gifted to us by our Creator, and that God is essentially God. So anyways, that's where I'll talk about that now, and let's get back to the reading. Now, this is no little deal. This is not a course on miracles. This is not another book that has been written. This is transcribed by us through Paul. You all witness, you all question at times, and you will direct when Paul self pulls out because he thinks he is crazy, or because he doesn't want to know the answers because they challenge his own belief systems. So there is going to be one requirement for neutrality for the process to take hold. Other than that, it's really a question of meeting and transcribing and owning the possibility that the work that we are bringing forth in many ways, a vehicle for the manifestation of Christ in man. And when we talk about Christ, we will be clear now. We talk about Christ as a creation of God inhabiting man in its fullness. We do not say, you are Jesus, any more than we say this thing or that, or a light thing that can be called Jesus. Jesus is a personage of the Christ, a manifestation of the Christ in fullness. And there are others as well who have ascended to the level of understanding and frequency, and in part their wisdom will be informing the text that we work through with Paul and through this process of understanding. Tonight we are going to have an assignment in order to realize the book fully, and that is to imagine the book as sealed, a sealed book of a promise that has been waiting to be unfolded for many, many years. And the unfoldment of the book will come with time. As each chapter is opened, the seal is broken, and the wonders that have been held within will be open to the public who reads and wonders and accepts the vibration as its truth. Now this is the work of the night. Because once you understand that the book is already written, and to a large extent, this process of transcription and the awareness and receptivity to the information held therein, it becomes a spontaneous act of being present for a miracle, as it were. Yes, indeed, we will say this: you can be present for a miracle. Now, to wonder what a miracle is to ask yourself, what am I? What is the one before me? What is the sky? What is love? What is a tree? What is my name? You are a miracle. All of these things are miracles. And what we are consigning to you is a miracle of understanding that will bring forth in its way the triumphant Christ itself into manifestation. Now, we do not say this lightly. This is not a tour book. This is not a how-to book. This is not a book to solve your problems and take away the responsibility of your lives. That is very significant, because when people buy books that are going to save them, they are paying someone to do the work for them. And in fact, that is always the false truth, because the work that can only be done by the self, and the self's own worth is received in consciousness. So when the self does not believe it can be fixed, healed, responded to as Christ, you know well that cannot be undertaken. But in fact, those blemishes that stand in the way of perfection of this realization can be cleared. And once they are cleared, the true face shines forward in beauty and wonder. And that will be the effect for those who engage in the process that we engage them in. Now, I think the important part of what I just had read here is that this isn't a self-help book, it's a self-mastery book. And in order to master oneself, one must put in their own work. And there isn't a savior who's going to come across and basically tell you what something means. It requires you to understand what it means first. And that's kind of why I said that this particular series isn't the end all of the series, nor is it me just reading the book to you and you listening. It's me reading the book to you, yes, but it's also you doing your own work. And I highly encourage you to come along and get your own copy of this book and perhaps even read it through and then perhaps, listen to me before or after, whatever you would like, and, see what resonates with you. Because self-mastery is doing things for yourself and doing your own learning and own healing. This is just basically kind of like the tipping point, the beginning point. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, well, we go back to the person referred to as Jesus. See, my understanding of religion and where I've come with this is that Christ was something that Jesus had aligned to, that Jesus had been able to align to the Christ frequency, and therefore that is what empowered him to do that stuff that he did. And I say stuff because I'm just, you know what I'm talking about it if I'm talking about it, and I'll just call it all stuff. But that's what allowed him to perform those apparent miracles. And we'll go a lot more into how and why a lot of it worked and some of it didn't work, because it does definitely play into the reality of our world and, well, what happened. But the point being of this is that Jesus had aligned to the Christ frequency that was a gift from God, from his and our Creator, allowing him to demonstrate that this ability was able to be done by other Homo sapiens who lived as beings on Earth. And, just as a side note, they often talk about how Jesus was the Son of God. Well, if God is the Father, then we are all sons and daughters of God. Or we could all say that we are all sons of and daughters of God, but we're also sons and daughters of Mother Nature as well. Transitioning now. And this is a transitioning time. And the time that you stand in must first be understood in order for you to recognize the achievement of the Christ as it stood the test of time. The manifestation of Christ in man has remained primarily an idea for the last 2,000 years, and that has been the ideal that has not made itself fully known, fully realized, fully understood, although the teachings that would have enabled this to be so are present in every religion on the planet. However, the withstanding of that, the understanding that this is the time when these changes are remarkably apparent, will become so understood by you that this will be a transition in your understanding of who and what you are and who and what you've always been. The time that you are standing in is a time of great change, and the change we speak of is a cosmic one. And it is an interfacing with the consciousness of man and man's creations in a grand scale. Step out, Paul. We need to give them more information. And Paul is actually obscuring because he's trying to listen to what's being said as it's said. And that's not an effective way to hear. The easiest way for Paul is to do this is to step outside of the picture as if he's in a bathroom outside the backyard and say, okay, there's stuff going on inside the house, and I trust what's going on inside of the house is safe, so I might as well read a magazine. So we'll say this: there is nothing going on in this body, Paul, that you have to fear being taken over. There is nothing terrible happening. You can align to us, and we will deliver the speech to the context that you will step out. So this isn't a chapter, this is a discussion. the first tape for the book, this is not. This is a preparation and an understanding of how the work needs to happen. Now, trials come to every man when he decides, I'm going to go forward and claim my consciousness as the Christ. Everybody you know who has taken this at one time has had a hard time. So why, Paul, would you assume that your path or the path of those that you teach would be a whole lot different? It's not an easy path, and it's only not easy because it moves things. And when you unleash a cave by rolling away a boulder that has blocked its entrance, its face, and everything that has been sealed within comes out screaming as it's exposed to the light, that is the process you have undertaken. And those you work with, like it or not, will have a similar experience. Now, it doesn't need to be hard. It doesn't need to be hard at all. It simply needs to be. And all that is hard is your attachment to the regulations you have placed on yourself for the self to be and to see and experience the world in a certain way. That's all there is to it. If you don't believe that the trees will fall, when the trees fall, you will be astonished. Now I'm going to stop right there because that's kind of one thing I learned about healing. When you start the process of healing, sometimes in order to, and this is a metaphor, sometimes in order to get to what needs to be healed, you have to block or knock away those things which were holding that trauma up. And in this example, he talks about a boulder blocking a cave door. So if you want to get into the cave to, heal those situations that are inside, you have to move the boulder. And when you move the boulder, you can imagine lots of different things suddenly coming out. There could be bats. There could be foul or bad smelling air. There could be toxic air. There could be, a bear in there who had gotten in from a different entrance. The point is that when you move that boulder, and the boulder is representative of a trauma or something that's blocking, when you start to do that, it creates possibilities for other things to come up. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not actually a bad thing at all, but oftentimes people will see things that are starting to come out, and it gives them reason for why they aren't going to move forward. But if you don't move that boulder, you can't get inside the cave. If you have any questions about that, definitely leave that in the comments, because I think that's a major block for a lot of people when it comes to their own healing journey. If you don't believe that trees will fall, when the trees fall, you will be astonished. If you believe that trees fall all the time in the forest, you are not surprised at all when you find yourself stepping over the tree trunks on a path in the woods. That's the way it is. If you believe the structures that you have created to give yourself worth or prestige or a feeling of safety or belief in your abilities to do certain things, if you believe that all of these permanent structures, you will be shocked when suddenly you are not able to write anymore, or when you suddenly have a new desire, or suddenly the prestige that you require to give you praise in an external way is vanished. Then what do you have? Now, if you know that the trees fall all the time in the woods, you go, okay, here we go. I'm continuing on my path, and I may have to climb over a tree, but that's all there is to it. If you believe that trees never fall, and you are stuck by a tree, you're going to have a harder time with it because your world will be rocked. This country, 9/11, did something very similar to the consciousness of this country. It realigned itself first to victimhood, and then to outrage, and then to belief in retribution. And all of those things, and those were all required by the collective consciousness of thinking and the experience of a country who did not believe in such thing that could happen to them. If there had been another consciousness, the responses would have been fairly different, and the premonition of change and this change of status of this country would have been worked with in a very different way. But because the country was in a frightened action and then in revenge, which is always unconscious, because one cannot truly be conscious and be in revenge. You will understand that the course that was acted on was approved of by the mindset of a country that did not believe that the trees could fall in the woods. There are trees falling all over the place right now, and people are climbing and they're building tree houses and they're building tunnels. The people are hiding their money, and they're doing whatever they need to prepare for a difficulty, which, as you know, creates difficulty. You do not prepare for a divorce without planning a divorce, and you do not prepare for a difficulty without planning for a difficulty. That is different from saying, I'm going to save my money. I'm not going to give up something that I need right now that gives me the feeling of safety. However, if you hold on to something for the safety that it's going against the soul's requirements, you will find that there is a difficulty ahead. Because at this time of the planet's juncture, the realization of the soul's requirements must be first, period. It's going to happen anyway. All that will stand in the way is resistance. I think this is a very great place to end today's first part. First of all, what it said about 9/11. See, 9/11 had an event that a lot of people thought couldn't happen. And when it happened, it was everyone had their own reaction to it. And what it allowed for is it allowed for the unconscious desire to have revenge. And so it prompted a whole series of events. And basically, but my point is that it allowed for a lot of series of events. But the more important thing that I take away from this little passage right here at the end was that when he says, actually, I guess I'll get the exact words. You do not prepare for a divorce without planning a divorce, and you do not prepare for difficulty without planning for a difficulty. See, it's the idea that when we are planning for something, when we are planning for the divorce and we're planning for the difficulty or we're planning for the problem, that can essentially create a problem because we're focusing our attention on the problem. And that isn't the same as, doing things like saving. Just saving for the sake of saving, like letting go those comforts in a single day because you're saving for something for later. That's different than planning for something to happen. Something bad, of course. So when we're putting all our efforts into, like, for instance, one of the things that I notice a lot in my own community is there's so much information talking about bears. There's so many signs talking about, bears being present. And now that I'm not even in bear country right now, there's still signs everywhere talking about bears. And although there is the occasional bear, there's a lot more fear based on the idea of a bear. Bears being something to be scared of and therefore, clean up your garbage. When actually what would be better would just be clean up your garbage because it's your garbage and you should take care of nature. So rather than cleaning up because bears could be endangered or they could harm people, it's clean up your garbage, being prepared for doing it because it's the right thing to do. If you kind of get what I mean by that. My mouth is getting a little dry right now, so my words are getting a little bit stuck. But as I said, this isn't the end all. This is essentially an introduction to the book. This is part one of the series that I'm going to be ongoingly uploading and recording, in which we'll talk about certain areas and passages of the book. We are going to go through the book in a linear fashion, means we've started in this first part of the book and we will continue on, not necessarily exactly from this spot, but we will continue on through the book. So I look forward to you joining with me in part 2, and it will be coming soon. And I just have to get this part 1 uploaded. And I definitely encourage you to go out and buy the book. You'll find the link in the comments, and come take this journey with me. And if you don't have the ability to read this book, then repeat the audio a few times. I recognize that I do occasionally stutter or stop or pause on a word or repeat. I get all that. This is being done live, not live anymore on YouTube, but meaning that I'm basically uploading it as is. And it's just a beginner's step to something greater. And for me, this has been truly aspirational, inspirational. It's been a profound foundational part of my own personal healing journey. There's a lot of books to be reading, and I truly do hope that when I start that reading club or that workshop club or however it is that it comes about, I do hope that you will come join me. Actually, I trust that you'll come join me, especially if you got to the end of this right now. So thank you so much. Please leave as much comments in there. And of course, visit any and all of my other audios and videos that I have on YouTube or wherever it is that you're watching this. And of course, with the greatest desire, I'm gonna put this playlist at the end. So I'll put the number 2 video at the end, of course, but I'm also going to put my playlist for I4C podcast series. And I encourage you to, take a short spin on this particular podcast, because where we share our attention is what we create individually within our own realities. So with the more positive, higher vibrational, more information aligned with positivity and, love and the Christ frequency, the easier we are going to get into where we are all wanting to go. So thank you so much, and happy reading.